Hi folks, in this video I'm going to demonstrate how to replace the diverter motor in a KitchenAid dishwasher. The reason we're doing this is that the dishwasher was leaking below, and after doing some troubleshooting I determined that it was the diverter motor, and I'll show a video clip of the leak itself in a little bit. But here's the new part right here. This is what it looks like. That's what we're going to be installing. So let's go ahead and get started. Again, this is a KitchenAid model. The model number is KDFE304DBL0. To determine your model number, you can always check the sticker inside the dishwasher door. And I'll see if I can figure out which model numbers this process will apply to, but this is the one that we're working on today. So first thing we need to do is turn off power, which I've already done. At the electrical panel, we turned off the breaker, and we also want to turn off the water supply under the sink. You should have a hose, looks something like that stainless steel braided hose there in the background, supplying water to your dishwasher. You want to turn off that valve, and then I would recommend trying to start a dish cycle and just confirm that the water is in fact turned off. Once you've done that, cancel the cycle, make sure the dishwasher drains and gets all the water out, and then that should minimize the amount of leaking that you're going to experience when you disconnect the drain hose later. I've done all that already, so we're ready to get started. The very first step we need to do is remove the access panel or toe kick here at the bottom, and you can see there's a plastic retaining screw on either side. We just need to turn this 90 degrees on each side. I'll see if I can demonstrate that. Like that. Now it should pull straight out, and you'll see that releases the access panel. Now we have clear access to the underside. I'm going to reposition to move on to the next step. Okay, now that we have access to the underside, we're going to have 3 connections that we need to undo in order to be able to slide the dishwasher out from its opening. It's possible that in certain installations you may have enough slack in these lines to not have to do this, but I think that's highly unlikely. We do need to get the dishwasher all the way out of the opening and probably lay it on its back. So I'm going to proceed with disconnecting everything. So those connections are all visible here. Of course, we've got our water supply line here. That's the braided hose that we saw under the sink cabinet, and we've made sure that there is no water pressure on that now. So we're going to have to disconnect that at this coupling right here, and then we've got this plastic drain hose that we're going to have to disconnect. That of course runs back into the sink cabinet as well and ties into the drain pipe from your kitchen sink. And then lastly, we've got an electrical connection here. We're going to need to open up this junction box and disconnect the wiring connections inside, and that way we can leave the power wire coming from the wall, which you see right there. We can leave that underneath the opening, and it won't restrict us from pulling the dishwasher out of the opening. So I am going to work on that first. It looks like, let's see, there is a hex screw or nut right there. We need to remove that so that this entire box will come off the frame of the dishwasher. I believe that's a 1/4 inch by looking at it, but let me confirm that and get it removed, and then we will move on to the next step. Okay, we got that screw removed. It does require a 1/4 inch nut driver, so I'm going to set that aside. And I was actually wrong. The cover just hinges out like this. The entire box does not look like it removes from the dishwasher itself. So we should be able to keep this open out of our way to get to the wiring connections. Now before you disconnect these, I'd recommend using either a electrical tester or simply trying to start the dishwasher to confirm that you do have the correct breaker turned off. I've already done that. I'm confident that there is no power, but just please be safe when working with electricity. So we just want to make sure that we pay attention to how the wiring is set up. In this case, this is what you'd expect to see. The black wire is going to be your hot coming from the electrical panel. It should connect to the black of the dishwasher pigtail. And the white is your neutral. Of course, the bare copper is the ground. Now there is a chance that your wiring may not match these colors, at least not coming from the wall. So just make sure you pay attention to what colors are connected so that you can, when you put things back together, you can make sure that everything is hooked up the way that you found it. So we just need to disconnect the wire nuts by turning them counterclockwise. That'll expose the wire ends. If they're twisted together, just take a pair of pliers if necessary and untwist them. I'm going to need to take a Phillips screwdriver and disconnect this retaining screw on the ground wire so that we can get that loose. And then there's a lock nut here that you can see will spin freely right now. We need to turn that clockwise, and then we're going to need to pull it. It's threaded onto the wiring coupling here. Once we get it off, we're going to need to pull it off the ends of the wire, and that will release the wire coming from the wall from the dishwasher itself so that it won't restrict us from pulling it out. So I'm going to wrap all of that up, and then we will move on to the two plumbing connections. Okay, before we move on, I just wanted to mention that if you encounter this lock nut or locking screw being held on very tight, you can take a flathead screwdriver and place it on the outer rim of the lock nut like that, and hopefully just with manual pressure you can spin it. Sometimes you may have to tap this with a hammer or something while you're trying to put rotational pressure on it to get it to spin, but in my case it was not held on very tight. So that's the idea. And then again, once we get it all the way off, you just need to pull it off the ends of the wires like that. And now you'll see these can push through the opening in the back of the junction box. And now our wiring is free and no longer connected. So now we can move on to the plumbing. Let me grab the tools I'm going to need, and I'll be right back. Okay, we're ready to move on. I decided to partially reinstall that screw in the side of the electrical box just because it kept wanting to swing open and get in my way. You don't have to do that, but I thought I'd mention that. That may be helpful. The next thing I'm going to do, I think, is try to get the drain hose disconnected, just because it's crossing over the water supply connection here, and I'd like to just be able to pull this out of the way completely so we can have better access to this fitting right there, because we're going to have to turn that with a crescent wrench. So to get this drain hose off of the pump, there is a squeeze connector there. You can see this red or orange thing here. You need to put a pair of pliers on here and squeeze it, which will release the tension around the outside of the hose. I don't know if I'll be able to show this just because of where it's located. Well, you might be able to see that. So I've got it squeezed, And then you just want to pull it back like that. And then I forgot to mention that when you disconnect it, you're going to have some water come out. So just have a towel handy to sop that up. But again, that's why you want to make sure you drain before you disconnect the power. Make sure you cancel the cycle and make the pump run to drain most of this out. That residual water is probably just stuff that was trapped in the low point of the hose here. So I'm going to grab my towel, clean that up, get this hose out of the way, and then we will work on disconnecting the water supply. Okay, you can see I've pushed the drain hose up out of the way. And I went ahead and just stuffed a paper towel in the end of the drain pump outlet, because you can see there's a little bit of residual water in there that wants to drip out, so the towel will help soak that up. So now we can move on to this fitting. This is just going to require a crescent wrench, and we're going to want to spin this counterclockwise. So in this orientation, we'll be turning it towards us. And again, some water is going to come out of this. Shouldn't be a lot. If you did what I said earlier and tried to start a cycle after you turn the water off, that should have caused the dishwasher to fill using any trapped water in this line. But there may be some still stuck, in the low point like this. So just have a towel ready to mop this up. So I'm going to go ahead and disconnect this, and then we should be close to being able to pull the dishwasher out. Okay, I just wanted to provide a progress update here. I would recommend holding this fitting with one hand while you operate the wrench with the other, because it's connected to a plastic fitting on the solenoid, which basically just allows water to enter the dishwasher when you start a cycle. But you don't want to be putting a lot of torque on this, because you potentially could snap off those plastic threads. So be gentle. Unless you've got a lot of corrosion, you shouldn't have a super hard time loosening this fitting. If it looks like it's gunked up and stuff, and it's really tight, then just use extra caution and make sure you support this brass fitting here. In my case, this was not extremely tight, so it's coming off fairly easy. However, because of the clearance here, you can only get about, I don't know, a 1/20th of a turn each time you move the wrench handle. And I'm having to have the wrench oriented one way and then remove it and flip it over for the next bite, like that, and just back and forth. So it's a bit tedious, but not hard. So just take your time, and again, just be careful with the fitting up here. I'm going to finish getting this off, and then we'll see if we can get the dishwasher out of the opening. Alright, you can see I've gotten the supply line disconnected. I would recommend slowly cracking it open about halfway, and then stop and wait and see if water leaks out. I ended up finding out in the process that the shutoff valve for this supply line does not work, so it was not stopping the flow of water. So I ended up getting a pretty good stream of water as I started to loosen this thing. So I stopped, retightened it, and ended up having to shut off the main to the house so that I could shut off the water supply. So just be careful when you're disconnecting it. You don't want to find out after it's disconnected that you still got full working pressure. You're gonna have a problem then. So just be slow taking it off and double check. So now that we've got that disconnected, we're ready to pull the dishwasher out. However, you also need to double check inside the top to confirm whether or not your model is fastened to the underside of the countertop. In this case, this one is not. This has a granite top, which you can't easily screw into. Sometimes you'll see a metal bracket across the top here that's glued to the underside of the top, and then screws. There'll be a clip on the dishwasher itself with a screw into that metal bracket. So double check for that. If you have a laminate or a wood countertop, you probably will see those metal clips that come off the front like this, and then you'll have one screw on this side and one screw on the other that you just need to remove. And then the dishwasher should slide out. In my case, I think it's just friction fit in there. So we're ready to go ahead and slide this out. I'm gonna shut the door to do this and reposition. Actually, one last thing before we remove the dishwasher, I wanted to mention again why we're doing this. The diverter motor, which essentially pumps water to the top of the dishwasher so that the dishes on the top rack get sprayed as well. Anyway, that's the diverter motor that does that, and that's what's leaking in this case. So we're looking at it right there. That plastic housing is the diverter motor, and I've got a clip of it leaking. Unfortunately, obviously everything was still connected then, so it was kind of in the way of getting a good shot. But I'll show that here after this, so you can at least see what's going on. But that's what we're after. We've got to get that part out. So the next step is to physically remove the dishwasher. So I'm going to move on to that, but just wanted to mention that this is the reason that we're taking the dishwasher out, and that's the part that we're going to have to replace. Okay, one last thing before we remove the dishwasher. I realized that I'm going to need to adjust the feet on the front in order to free up the dishwasher. It was cranked tight so that it was friction fit against the underside of the countertop. So you can take an adjustable wrench and turn these counterclockwise, and they'll raise up a little bit to give yourself some clearance, and that should relieve any pressure on between the top of the dishwasher and the bottom side of your countertop. So I'm going to finish doing that on both sides and then see if the dishwasher will free up. Alright, not so fast. I realized I'd overlooked 2 screws holding the side of the dishwasher in place. There's a small plastic cap here that you can pry off using a sharp knife. And then, I don't know if you'll be able to see inside there. There you go. There's a Phillips screw back there holding the dishwasher to the side of the cabinet. So I'm going to check the other side as well, make sure those are removed, and then I think finally I can wiggle this thing out. So make sure you check those. You may or may not have screws there, but check before you start yanking on the dishwasher. Alright, you can see I've finally gotten the dishwasher partially removed. And I wanted to show, if you have screws in the side, you're going to have these little clips that hook into the frame. And when you try to slide it out, once you've removed the screws from here, they pass through this hole here. In my case, these things flipped open, and I was fighting them like that because they were behind the front of the cabinet. Imagine my fingers being the edge of the cabinet. These clips flipped open and got behind that, so I kind of had to stick a flat blade screwdriver in there. I could see in the gap here, I could see the bracket was fighting me, and I kind of just wedged a screwdriver in there and kind of had to tap the end of it with a hammer, which basically bent the bracket around backwards back here so that I could slide the dishwasher out. And you can see I kind of mangled the bracket a little bit in the process, but it should still work. So when I slide it back in, I just have to make sure that it doesn't fall out. I may have to secure this one with some tape on the back side, but then the idea is that the hole in the bracket right there lines up with the hole in the side of the dishwasher where we remove those little plastic caps. So anyway, hang on to these, don't lose them. Now that the dishwasher is loose, we can finish sliding it out, and then we can move on to the repair. Okay, before we fully remove the dishwasher from the opening, I'm going to leave it tucked in just a little bit so that it doesn't want to flip forward, because the next step is to open the door and remove the lower rack. And then we're going to need to next remove the wand from the bottom. Let me get the rack out of the way first. Okay, with the rack out of the way, now we're going to want to take this lower spray wand out. You see here there's a plastic clip or nut below it, right here. We want to grab this and twist it counterclockwise. There we go. And then the whole assembly will come off like that. And we can set that aside. All right, the next step is going to be to remove this plastic fitting here from the bottom of the dishwasher. And in order to do that, it looks like there's a retaining clip here that we've got to lift and then spin everything this way. I think this and these two clips hold this pipe into this fitting right here. So I'm probably going to need two hands to do this. Maybe I can prop my phone up. Let me see if I can get the phone propped up and film this while I do it. All right, I'm going to give this a shot. So I'm going to lift on this tab with one finger, start to twist. All right, I've gotten the tab clear of the clip that holds it in place. Hopefully you can see that. Now I've got to work on these two clips that hold this pipe in. And I'm just going to gently pry on them. Twist this. I've got it started. I also got to pull this loose, it looks like. I've basically just popped that hose straight up and I've set it off to the side now. Now I should be able to twist this. There we go. Then we take this cover off and then pull out this little white piece. I believe that's the diverter itself. Alright, so we've got the old one out. Now let's work on getting the motor out from below. Alright, now we're going to need to access the diverter motor from the bottom of the dishwasher, so we're going to need to lay it on its back. So I've got it completely removed from the opening now. I'm going to tilt it down. I've got a towel down to protect the floor, and then we can access the motor from the bottom. Okay, with the dishwasher laid on its back, now we have full access to everything. You will probably get some more water dripping out once you tilt it back like this. I went ahead and just hooked my drain hose up here to keep it out of the way. And now you can see this is the diverter motor. And it looks like we've got two wiring connections to undo, as well as two screw connections. One here and one here. These look like a Torx bit, so I need to figure out which size, and then just make note of where the wiring connections go. There's a blue pair on the left side here and a red pair on the right side here. And it looks like each of these connections have a retainer clip here, so you'll need to pry this back gently and then pull the connector out. Same thing over here. Pull that back and then pull the connector out. So I'm going to remove those. Let me figure out what size Torx bit I need, and I'll let you know in the next clip. Alright, I confirmed that the two screws we needed to remove were a T15 size Torx, which looks like, let's see if I can get it to focus, kind of a star bit. Looks like that on the end. So if you don't have one of those, make sure you go out and pick one up before you start this project. So once the screws are free, the only other thing we need to do is there is a small plastic stud back here. You can see the other end of it here. It fits through a hole in this gray plastic piece here. We need to push the back side of it that way, and I'll show you here in a second, but kind of pull up on with your finger. That's what it looks like. Let's see. You can see it right there. That hooks on the back side of right here. So once you pop that loose, the whole assembly will come out. There's our old one. We're ready to go back in with a new one, but first we need to apply some grease to this shaft, and my kit that I ordered came with the grease. I think they all should, but I'm going to reposition here on the countertop and do that, and I'll make sure to post a link in the video description to the part that I ordered. Alright, I'll be right back. Alright, here's the new diverter motor. This is the shaft that goes up into the bottom of the dishwasher, and here's the grease pack that it came with. So we're just going to take some grease with our finger and apply it all the way around the shaft here. I'm going to load it up a little bit more. I'm going to use two hands so that the motor's not sliding around on me while I do it. But once we get the grease applied, then we're ready to reinstall this in the bottom of the dishwasher. Okay, with the grease applied to the motor shaft, now we can reinstall it in the bottom of the dishwasher. Up inside, there's a small hole that you hopefully can see. My battery's low, so the flash won't come on, but you can see up in the center there, there's a hole that the shaft needs to slide up into. And you want to try to get the screw holes aligned with the receiving screw receivers at the same time. And then again, there's that stud on the bottom that has to slide into that small hole in the gray plastic clip there. So I think I've got it aligned and in place properly. So now I just need to reinstall the two T15 Torx screws. They don't need to be overly tight, just hand tight with a screwdriver, and then we will make up the wiring connections next. Okay, I've gotten the Torx screws installed. Now it's time to reconnect the wiring. If you recall, the red pair goes on the right side in this connection, and it should just push straight in. The connector goes like this with the wires entering from the right side, and the left side will click behind that retaining tab. There you go. The blue wires go on the left side. There is a retaining clip here for the wires, so I'm going to slip them into that like that, and then push the, let's see, I think, yeah, the connection goes in like this, and the retaining clip is on the back side there. Make sure it's secured, and we're good to go. So we're done on the bottom side now. Now we can flip the dishwasher back up and reinstall everything inside. Alright, I've got the dishwasher upright again, and before I fiddle with anything inside, I'm going to go ahead and get it back into the opening so that I'm not fighting it trying to flip forward while I'm working inside. So I'm ready to go ahead and slide it back in. I decided to tape down the electrical and water supply hoses just so they're not trying to slide back behind the dishwasher as I'm pushing it into place. Hopefully that'll make this part a little bit easier and also prevent them from kinking. So I'm just going to gently slide this back into place now, and then we can access everything underneath to make the connections back up. Okay, you can see the dishwasher's almost all the way inserted into the opening. My trick with the tape on the floor definitely did help prevent the lines from getting pushed back behind it, so we have access to them now. And I'm pretty much ready to insert it the rest of the way in, but I just wanted to remind you that if you do have screws on the side, you're gonna want to make sure that these clips are still in place. Here's the one that I kind of mangled earlier, so I've secured it with a piece of tape so that it doesn't fall off. So I'm going to finish pushing this all the way in. I also want to make sure that this rubber gasket around the perimeter is seated, is not popped up or loose, and it looks like it's good. So now we can go ahead and finish pushing this all the way in, get it where it needs to be, and then I'll work on adjusting the feet to secure it in place, and then I'll install the screws on either side. Okay, so I got the dishwasher fully inserted into the opening where I wanted it, and then I adjusted the feet back down by turning them clockwise, and I basically put one hand under the bottom of the dishwasher and lifted it up until the top was tight to the bottom of the countertop, and then I finished adjusting the foot to make sure that it was tight, and I've done that on both sides. So now we can move on to reconnecting everything underneath. I think what I'll do is the reverse order of how I did it in removal. So we'll start with the water line, then do the drain line, and then lastly do the electrical connection. So I'm going to reposition and get started on that next. Okay, you can see I've started the water supply hose back onto the brass fitting here, and you can see I also applied some Teflon tape to help the thread seal. Just make sure you do not cross thread this, because it will definitely leak then. Once you finish getting it hand tight, then we're going to do like we did before. I'm going to support the brass fitting with one hand while using the wrench to tighten the fitting with the other hand until we get it tight. You don't want to over tighten it, but you also don't want it to leak. So just use your best judgment. We can always tighten it up a little bit later if we do see a bit of a drip once we restore water pressure. I'm going to finish tightening that up now, and then we'll move on to the drain hose connection there at the pump. Alright, we're ready to reattach the drain hose. You just want to make sure that the spring clamp is pulled back away from the end of the rubber fitting enough that the fitting will slide onto the outlet pipe from the pump. So just gently slide it on there. You may have to twist it a little bit. Once you're sure it's on there securely, then you can slide the spring clamp around until it gets tight, finger tight, and then we're going to need to take our pliers and squeeze that and slide it over the end of the rubber fitting to make sure that it's compressed on the plastic outlet pipe. So let's see if I can do this while filming. I'm probably going to need two hands to manipulate that, but you get the idea. It's the same thing we did earlier to take it apart. Let me finish that, and then we will reconnect the wiring. Alright, now we're ready to reconnect the wiring. So again, we're going to need to feed all three wires, the hot, ground, and neutral, and the end of the connector through the opening in the back of the junction box there. So we're going to have to fish everything through the opening there. Like that. And then we need to slide the lock nut over the end of the wires and spin it onto the connector up in there. So I'm going to get that connected and secured, and then we'll make up the connections, the wiring. Okay, I've gotten the lock nut tightened down. Now we need to install the ground screw, or install the ground wire behind the ground retaining clamp. So I'm going to loosen the ground screw and make sure that the wire is slipped behind that clip. There we go. Now I can retighten the screw. Make sure that the wire stays behind the clamp. And we can kind of bend the rest of the ground wire out of the way. And now we just need to make up the hot and the neutral from the wall feed to the hot and the neutral of the dishwasher pigtail here. Again, they should be black to black and white to white, but it's not always the case. Your dishwasher will be black and white, but the feed from the wall may be other colors. So again, recall from disassembly which colors were connected and make sure you put them back the same way using your wire nuts. And then once we have those made up, we can close the junction box cover and reinstall the 1/4" hex screw over here. Alright, so I'm going to get this wrapped up, and then we will move on to reinstalling everything inside the dishwasher, and we'll test it out. Alright, the wiring connections are made up, and I've gently folded everything back into place, making sure that none of the wires are going to get pinched by the box cover, which we can now swing closed and then reinstall the 1/4" nut there with our nut driver. That'll wrap this part up, and then we'll go back inside the dishwasher and reinstall everything inside, and we'll be done. Okay, obviously we're back inside the dishwasher now. Getting ready to reassemble everything in here. First thing we got to do is check the shaft here, see if there's any grease that came through. You can see there's a rubber seal right there, and I think that's what was leaking before. I guess the shaft had worn so that it wasn't making a good seal with that rubber gasket there, and that's why water was leaking out before, I believe. So hopefully the new part here does the trick. So we got the shaft cleaned up. Now we need to put the new diverter on. And if you notice, the hole in the diverter is keyed to match up with the diverter motor shaft, which is also keyed. So you just want to make sure that the notch lines up properly, like that. And that way they don't spin independent of each other. Now we can drop this back down. And if you recall, we had to lift up this pipe, which connects to that hole right there, and we had to spin it counterclockwise, lifting this tab above that retaining clip, and also removing this pipe here from these clips here. So I'm going to kind of slip everything into position. Alright, I think I've gotten everything into position. You also have to, you'll notice there are some tabs on the outside circumference of this part that have to line up with some notches in the female receiving portion there. So it's kind of tricky, but all right, just seated. And now I've got to gently twist. There we go. Push that down into place. Make sure these are locked in, and make sure this clip is locked in place. It'll secure. Looks like it's seated all the way around, so I think we're good there. So now we can reinstall the lower spray wand here. Let me grab that and we'll resecure it. All right, so I've got the lower spray wand here. We need to get these four little pegs to go around the perimeter of this fitting here. There you go. You'll know when it seats because it sits down flat like that. And now we just turn, not the wand itself, but this locking nut down here, turn that clockwise. You'll feel it secure into place. So that's locked back in now. And last thing is we just need to set the lower rack back in place, and then we can restore power and water and do a test and see if our repair worked before we reinstall the lower access panel. I'm going to keep that off until we test so we can take a look under there and see what's going on. And assuming everything is good, then I'll reinstall the screws on either side and put the caps back in when we're all done. So let's get the rack in here and do a test and see what happens. Okay, I've gotten water and power restored, and I've just been kind of watching the water supply connection for a few minutes to see if it's going to drip. I'll put a dry paper towel under there, and I don't see any evidence of a leak, so I think that's good. So I'm going to go ahead and do a test cycle, and I'm just going to watch and see if I see any water show up. I'm going to cross my fingers that the problem's solved now, but I wanted to eliminate any other leaks before I tested it. So let me reposition here and start the dishwasher, and we will see what happens. Alright, clearly you can hear the dishwasher running, and got the camera focused on the diverter motor. I'm not seeing anything, thankfully. Sorry, get this out of the way. So far it looks dry, but I'm going to monitor it and run a whole cycle maybe and see what happens, and then put everything back together once I'm confident the problem's solved. But I think we're good. I'm going to keep an eye on this, and then we'll wrap this up. Alright, I'm satisfied that it's not leaking, so I'm going to go ahead and put everything back together. Again, I need to, or I've already installed the screws on the side, so I can reinstall the plastic caps that cover those holes, like so. And then down below, we just need to reinstall the access panel. It goes in like this. Just need to line up the holes with those rectangular slots. And then the retaining clips, again, look like this. We need to put them in with the long edge of the tab oriented up and down like that. You'll see that the slot in the head will be horizontal, and then we just need to turn that 90 degrees with a flathead screwdriver. Like that. Now it's locked in place. Same thing with this side. Again, the tab goes, you can see it's longer in one direction than the other, so it needs to be oriented vertical. Slide it in place, and then lock it by turning it 90 degrees, and we're done. So that wraps up this project. This is something that anybody could do with a little bit of patience. There's no really specialty tools required, just a little bit of knowledge and courage to tackle it yourself. I think the part that we ordered was about $115. Again, I'll post the link to it in the video description in case you need to order one as well. But you know, this is something that anybody can do and save quite a bit of money probably. So I hope this video's been helpful. Thanks for watching.